Good evening, time traveler. First off, hit that subscribe button, or you're gonna lose at least 15 nights of sleep. Plump up your pillow, get cozy, and get ready for another trip back in time. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. It's always great to see how far these journeys reach. Today, we're gonna find out what it was actually like to work on a pirate ship. It's a job Hollywood's romanticized so much that we tend to forget the real-life version was basically choosing between starving on land or dying of scurvy at sea. But hey, let's not kill the magic entirely. Let's just see what it was really like to live in a world of creaking wood, salt water, and dreams of treasure that, more often than not, were nothing but a mirage. Imagine for a second you're walking down the dusty streets of Port Royal, Jamaica, in 1650. The scorching Caribbean sun is beating down on your face. The stench of rotting fish mixed with cheap rum hits your nostrils. And you realize your last few coins just went toward a meal even your dog wouldn't touch today. It's in that moment of pure desperation that you hear someone shouting about a job opening at the docks. Recruitment, not your average job ad. Getting recruited for a pirate ship wasn't exactly like answering a LinkedIn ad. In fact, most pirates started their careers in ways that were way less glamorous than we think. Some were merchant sailors who'd simply had enough of working for pennies under tyrant captains. Others were runaway slaves who saw the sea as a shot at freedom. Relative freedom, of course, because trading a prison on land for a floating prison wasn't exactly what you'd call an upgrade. The recruitment process was surprisingly democratic for the time. Unlike the Royal Navy, where you could literally be kidnapped into service, a charming practice called impressment, pirates usually needed your consent. After all, nothing's worse than having an unhappy guy on board when you're planning to board a Spanish galleon loaded with gold. The pirate captain, usually a guy who'd survived long enough to earn respect through a mix of sailing skills and calculated brutality, would explain the terms. And what terms they were. First, you'd sign your name or just draw an X, since being able to read was a luxury, on a document called the Articles of Agreement. It was a work contract that'd give any modern labor lawyer nightmares. These articles set clear rules: how the loot would be split, the punishments for different crimes, and what happened if you lost an arm or a leg in combat. Yeah, they had a macabre but functional workers' comp system. Losing your right leg was worth a certain amount of coins. Losing an eye was worth another. It was like an insurance catalog for workplace accidents, just a whole lot bloodier. Pirate democracy. Pirate democracy was real, but it had its limits. You could vote for the captain, decide which ship to hit, and how to split the treasure. But that democracy ended the moment the sails went up and the fighting started. During battle, the captain's word was absolute law, and questioning an order could result in you being used as a makeshift anchor. What drew people to this life wasn't just a thirst for adventure. It was the promise of equality and quick cash. On land, a regular guy couldn't dream of having the same voice as a nobleman. At sea, under the black flag, a former slave could become a quartermaster, the second in command, if he proved he was good at his job. It was a brutal meritocracy, but a meritocracy nonetheless. The odds of survival. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and buried treasure. The mortality rate was terrifying. Disease, combat, storms, and the gallows were waiting for most pirates. The average life expectancy of an active pirate was about 2 years. 2 years. Today, we complain about a 2-year cell phone contract. Imagine betting your entire life on that time frame. But for many, especially those coming from desperate situations, 2 years of relative freedom and a shot at wealth were worth more than a lifetime of guaranteed servitude on land. The office, life on board. Now that you're officially part of the crew, it's time to see your new workplace. Imagine the smallest apartment you've ever seen. Take away the bathroom, the kitchen, and any shred of privacy. Add the constant smell of damp wood, human sweat, and rotting fish, and you've got a rough idea of life on a pirate ship. A typical pirate ship in the Caribbean was usually a stolen vessel. Let's be honest, pirates weren't known for buying their tools. It could be a schooner, a brig, or if they got really lucky, a captured frigate. These ships were about 60 to 120 feet long, and in that cramped space lived anywhere from 50 to 200 men. During the day, the main deck was a hive of activity. Sailors climbed up and down the rigging like caffeinated monkeys. Others scrubbed cannons like they were caring for their own kids. Someone was always sewing sails or fixing ropes. The work never stopped, because a ship sitting still is a dead ship, and dead pirates don't get to spend their treasure. The menu: hardtack and salt beef. If you think airplane food is bad, wait until you see the menu of a 17th century pirate ship. It was a culinary experience that'd make any modern chef question their faith in humanity. There were no fridges or freezers. Everything had to be salted, dried, smoked, or you just hoped it'd last until the next stop. The main item was salt beef or salt pork. Imagine taking a piece of meat, burying it in so much salt it turns white as snow, letting it dry for weeks, and then trying to eat it. The texture was like an old shoe sole. To prep this delicacy, the cook, usually a guy who'd lost a limb and couldn't work the ropes anymore, would boil it in a giant pot of seawater for hours. Then you had hardtack, ship biscuits. These were made of flour and water, baked until they were hard as a rock. They lasted forever, but they also became condos for bugs. Weevils and maggots were permanent residents. The ritual was to bang the biscuit on the table to knock the big worms out before soaking it in soup to soften it up, because biting a dry hardtack was a guaranteed way to break a tooth. Water was another nightmare. It quickly turned into a soup of bacteria and algae. That's why rum was so vital. It wasn't just for fun, it was a liquid disinfectant. They'd mix 1 part rum with 3 parts water to make grog. Messing with a pirate's rum ration was a one-way ticket to a mutiny. The daily grind. The day started before dawn with the bosun's whistle. No snooze button here. First came the cleaning. The deck was scrubbed with stones and seawater until it shone. Then came the maintenance. Every rope and sail was checked. A snapped rope at the wrong time meant the difference between escaping a warship or dancing at the end of a rope. Climbing the mast was a nightmare. Imagine scaling a 100-foot tree that's constantly swaying in high winds and rain, knowing you could fall into the ocean at any second. Lookout duty in the crow's nest was lonely and dangerous, but crucial. They were the eyes of the ship. The battle, psychological warfare. Pirates didn't want to fight if they didn't have to. The preferred strategy was psychological intimidation. When a merchant ship saw the Jolly Roger on the horizon, their hearts would sink. The flag wasn't just for show. It was a carefully designed weapon. If you surrendered, you might live. If you fought, no mercy. If a battle did happen, it was pure chaos. The roar of cannons, the smell of gunpowder and blood, the sound of wood splintering. Pirates would use grappling hooks to pull the ships together, and then swarm the enemy deck with cutlasses and flintlock pistols. Most battles only lasted a few minutes. Once the pirates showed their numerical superiority, most merchant captains surrendered. It was just business. Disease, the invisible enemy. The biggest killer wasn't a cannonball, it was germs. Scurvy was the star of the show. Without vitamin C, your gums would bleed, your teeth would fall out, and old scars would literally reopen. Then there was dysentery from bad water, and malaria from tropical mosquitoes. The ship's surgeon was basically a butcher with a saw and a bottle of rum for anesthesia. They'd treat syphilis with mercury, which was basically like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It's a miracle anyone survived at all. Shore leave, Port Royal. After months at sea, seeing a port was a miracle. Port Royal was the wickedest city on earth. It was like Las Vegas, but with more rum and less hygiene. Pirates would spend a year's worth of loot in a single night on booze, gambling, and company. For many, it was about living for today, cause tomorrow was never guaranteed. The end of an era. Like all great parties, the Golden Age of Piracy eventually ended. In 1692, an earthquake sank most of Port Royal. Then, European powers stopped using pirates as privateers and started hunting them down. The Royal Navy got serious, and guys like Woodes Rogers offered a simple choice: a royal pardon or the gallows. Famous captains fell one by one. Blackbeard was killed in 1718. Bartholomew Roberts in 1722. Calico Jack was hanged, while Bonnie and Mary Red disappeared into history. The world was getting more organized, more legal, and less tolerant of men living under their own rules. The pirate ships rotted away, the black flags were burned, and the men were forced to choose between the rope or conformity. But the story stayed. Maybe what matters isn't the brutal reality, but the idea that once, not too long ago, regular people chose freedom over security, and the open ocean over the limits of life on land. And that's our trip to the past. If you enjoyed these facts, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until next time.